Welcome to an overview of instructional and training development strategies that I use as an instructional designer. I learned most of these when I worked for WIDS, the Worldwide Instructional Design System. However, I also learned some other techniques from my participation in the ISPI Professional Development Group and my educational experiences for both my bachelor and master's degrees, and from other colleagues. Because this is just an overview, I will not be going into detail on any of the processes. However, I feel I am covering enough of each so that you, the viewer, get an understanding as to how useful they can be. The Worldwide Instructional Design System's performance-based course development model is configured in a target type diagram, which shows progress towards a goal. The circles or layers of the target from the inside out are labeled who, what, when, and how. These each will be explained in the next slides. This process has two goals. The first is outstanding instructional design, starting from the middle and going out, and the second is effective instruction and learning, represented from the outside in. The inside circle is labeled who. These are our learners. We need to know what knowledge, skills, and abilities they possess because that will be the starting point for designing instruction that meets their needs and suits their capabilities. This is also where we explore the learner's life or work situation so we know why the training is needed. The second circle, labeled what, is exactly that. What will be learned? This is where we determine the objectives and supporting objectives for the training. The objectives, which can also be called outcomes, competencies, or other names, may be influenced by external or professional standards and organizational goals. Therefore, we also need to know what those are at this point in the process. The next circle is labeled when. The question we ask ourselves at this point is, when do we know the learners have arrived? That is, when are they ready to perform what they've learned in a real-world or authentic setting? This is where we identify our performance standards for any evaluations or other determinations of competence and includes the conditions and criteria for the evaluation. The performance information should be provided to the learners as early as possible in the learning experience so that they will know what is expected of them. It should be noted that many instructors and designers get confused as to why this step comes at this point in the process because they usually design the teaching part first, the evaluation afterwards. The reason it is in this point is the order is that knowing what the performance requirements are should help when designing the evaluation, as well as the teaching and learning activities. Learners should master each lesson or task prior to moving to the next. The outside circle of our diagram is labeled how. These are the learning activities, which is how the learners will learn, how teachers will teach, and how facilitators will facilitate. In this model, we try and use the learning activities which are learner-centered. Whereas teacher-centered activities place all the responsibility and the focus on the teacher to make learners understand, learner-centered activities place more of the responsibility on the learners to do the activities. This fosters lifelong learning. The learning activities should be linked to the intended outcomes and should include practice to reinforce the performance standards. Benchmarks and feedback provide learners with information about their progress. Next, we'll review the learning cycle, which provides guidance in how to develop and sequence learning activities. The learning cycle is a proven lesson design method which guides the development of learning activities. The first phase is the motivation phase. This is where we prepare learners for the lesson by providing them information about why they need to learn the topic or process and what to expect in the learning activities. One technique is to review the learning plan and proposed evaluation, which will occur in phase 4. I also like to include information about any safety concerns in the motivation phase. Next is the comprehension phase. This is where the learners obtain the information and skills needed to perform or complete the learning objectives or outcomes of the lesson. Next, learners move to the practice phase where they will get to reinforce their learning before the final application or evaluation. If the learner is having trouble in practice, they can return to the comprehension phase and review the materials they need before returning for more practice. Finally, Phase 4 is a practical evaluation in which they are evaluated according to the performance standards. I'm not going to go too in-depth with this 6 boxes model. I equate behavior engineering with maximizing performance. It can be applied to individuals and/or organizations. You may have seen it in some form or another already, but it originated with Tom Gilbert, the ISPI guru whose book we both have, and adjusted by B.F. Skinner and Carl Binder, 2 other performance gurus. I use it as part of a continuous performance assessment monitoring process, which keeps me focused on the reasons for needing training and also for the context in which I design training. I also see it as a leadership tool because, if you know your people like a leader should, you should be cognizant of each one of these boxes almost all the time and how it affects your workers. The 3 columns break the model down into behavior influences. The upper row refers to the environment in which work occurs, which is controlled by the employer or manager, and the lower row are the workplace behaviors of the worker or performer. In the first row, we ask if the employer is providing clear and concise expectations about what the performer is supposed to do, and if the performer is receiving timely and task or goal-oriented feedback. Next, does the performer have the tools and resources needed to perform at high levels? This is a critical factor. And then, does the employer make clear, fair, and appropriate consequences and incentives related to performance? For the performer, does he or she have the skills and knowledge needed to perform at a high level? This is the area that training addresses, though you can see that there are many other considerations besides training, even though training is what most managers feel they need. The next block, capacity, is sort of a big picture view of the person, or in the case of a large company, the section's role in reaching organizational goals. Do they know what happens before something gets to them or after it leaves? This helps them see why their role is important, and the organization should make sure that is clear. If you think of an organizational chart, the next step is making sure that everyone knows how it works and their role in it. Finally, everyone has a sense of their own worth and a reason for wanting to do the work, whether they have a passion for it or if it meets a need, such as to help pay for college for one of their children. This diagram made me a better instructional designer because it helped me see the bigger picture of how training fits into an organization and a person's role in that organization. In my opinion, this should be mandatory training for every leader and manager. A DACOM is a process for conducting an occupational analysis which leads to a program of instruction. DACOM is sort of an acronym for Develop a Curriculum. It uses a number of subject matter experts to describe what they do on the job. That is documented by the DACOM facilitator and organized into duties, tasks, and tools. The duties, tasks, and tools help create or confirm job descriptions and job resources needed for someone to perform at a high level. Once they are complete and organized in a chart, it should be distributed to current high performers throughout the field in various locations in order to verify how often a task is performed, how difficult tasks and duties are, and how critical each is to the job. This helps prioritize different duties and tasks in designing training. In the previous slides, we have looked at several instructional design strategies and processes. This includes a course development model, the learning cycle, the 6 boxes behavior engineering or performance model, and the DACM occupational analysis process. I have used all of these very effectively to facilitate the development of instruction. In another video, I will demonstrate the WIDS instructional design software, which is how I have documented my instructional design work. If you have any questions or desire more in-depth information on this presentation, please feel free to contact me.